This video is the final video for our first practical assignment. You should have already watched the lecture video for this week where I cover drawing setup for our layouts and drawing publishing. So if you haven't watched that video yet, you should go back and watch that right now before we continue, because I'm going to be discussing a lot of things that we have already covered within that video. All right, to start out, I need to make a couple of revisions, a couple small revisions to some of the things that we did in last week's video. Starting off with our reflected ceiling plan, I need to add a couple of lines in for this doorway, because whenever we hide it in our view to create our reflected ceiling plan, there are a couple of lines that also get hidden since they're a part of this block, and I just want to add those back in so that our reflected ceiling plan reads a little bit cleaner. So if you're at this point here, and don't worry about the dimensions or anything, I'm going to get into that in a little bit. Go ahead and use your freeze tool. So for on our home tab on our ribbon, go ahead and freeze, and we want to freeze this doorway. And I'm going to freeze out my tags as well. And then what I'm going to do is go into my layers, and I'm going to find my ceiling layers, and I'm going to unfreeze all of those temporarily, just so I can make a few edits. Okay, the next thing I want to do is select these two lines that we created and put on the A ceiling pat layer, and we're actually going to do an override to these so that they stay on that layer but the color changes. Okay, so with those two lines selected, go over to your properties, and you can also do this from up here, but what we need to do is find our color setting, and where that says by layer, hit the drop down, and let's just change that to red. So doing that's going to keep those on that layer, but it's just going to make them look a little bit better whenever we go to print this out. Okay, so with that done, we can go ahead and we can freeze our ceiling layers, and we can bring back the layers that we just hid. So we're going to bring back our room identification, and that should be it. Okay, so at this point we also need to make a couple of small revisions to the elevation layers that we created last week. All right, so I'm going to show you the layers that I have for my elevation in my project right now. There are a lot of extra layers in here just from things that I've copied into the project that you don't need to worry about. The only layers you need to worry about right now, actually let me expand the layer properties manager. The only ones you need to worry about right now, and make sure that yours are matching exactly what I have, are these elevation layers. So starting from AL of dark all the way down to this one right here, AL of thin. All of these ones that I have highlighted in blue, go ahead and pause the video and make sure that your settings are the exact same as mine. So make sure you have all these layers created, which I added one or two, I believe, since last week. And then make sure that the color setting and the line type settings match exactly to what I am showing on my screen here. Okay, so once you have done that and you have matched exactly what I have for our layer settings, we're going to discuss the elevation that we're going to be creating for the project. So this is what your elevation is going to look like, and I'm going to be providing you some detailed dimensions on how you will be replicating all of these cabinets. But in this video, I'm just going to get you started on the basic outlines and give you some tips and pointers on how we go about setting up elevations based on our floor plans. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm basically going to recreate this. Okay, so I'm going to move it up out of my way a little bit. And then, so whenever we're working on an elevation drawing, the first thing that we need to do is add in our elevation symbol. So we're going to go over here to our blocks palette that we added last week, and I'm going to copy this elevation symbol over. I'm going to turn off my ortho mode so that I can place that more accurately. I'm going to place this right in front of my washer and dryer in this open space right here. Okay, so with that done, this is the correct orientation because we're going to be drawing an elevation of this wall here between this wall and this wall. So with that in place, we need to edit the numbers that we are showing within the elevation marker. So if you remember from previous lectures, this top number is going to be the number of the view on our sheet, and this bottom number is going to be the sheet that we are placing the elevation onto. So we're going to double click on this marker, and then this is going to bring up our attribute editor. And for elevation number, we're going to set that to 1. And then I'm going to go down here to sheet number. And for sheet number, I'm going to set this to A102. And then we can click OK. All right, so now on your screen, you should see that our elevation marker is updated. We have 1, and that's going to be on sheet A102. Okay, so with that done, the next thing we're going to do is actually start working on the elevation itself. So whenever you're creating elevation drawings from scratch in a drafting program like AutoCAD, you want to use projecting lines in order to tell where your objects are going to fall within the elevation. You should remember this concept from your first year studio courses. You most likely did similar techniques. To create projecting lines, you can set your well, actually, it might be a good idea to create a new layer just for projection lines, so that way you can easily turn them off. So you might want to go in here, create a new layer, and call it something like construction lines, which I'm going to do. I'll show you that method. And then I'm going to turn off the plot setting so that just in case we leave those on by accident, they don't actually plot in our view. So we'll just set that to construction lines, and we'll turn off the plot setting. And then I'm just going to set the color to, we'll do color 7 for this. Okay, so with that created, we want to set our current layer to be our construction lines layer. And then we can just draw regular lines in. All right, so since the boundary of our view is going to be this point and this point, what you can do is start drawing some lines straight upward using your ortho mode. And we're going to drag straight up, and for these, it doesn't really matter how far we draw the lines because we're just establishing our horizontal constraints on how wide the view is. So I'm going to place one there, and then I can copy it. And I can place another one there. All right, so with those drawn in, we're going to draw in what is going to be our floor. So basically this line right here. Now this also, it doesn't matter where you start this line at because what really matters is the height of the view, which we're going to control afterward. So we can kind of just draw this anywhere. So I'm going to add in another line. And I'm going to use my reference line snapping, and I'm just going to make sure that I am constrained to that line, so it snaps directly to it. And then I'm going to draw that straight over till I get a perpendicular snap on my other construction line. And then I'll just hit enter to end the command. As you're doing this too, another option besides just creating these construction lines like we're doing with the line tool is there's a command called ray. And what ray does is it basically draws an infinite line between 2 points. So if I type ray and hit enter and select 2 points, it's going to create a line that goes infinitely in that direction. Okay, so now you can see I have this line that just goes way off and it never ends. that is also a helpful command for doing the same thing, establishing where our lines go and where things need to be. But if you just want to stick to the regular lines instead of using the ray command, you can do that too, and it works just as well. All right, so this is our floor line. Now, if you look at our elevation, we can see that our total height of our elevation is going to be 8 feet tall. So what we're going to do is just copy this line of 8 feet. All right. And now basically what we've done is replicated the boundary that this red outline is showing. All right. So since we have established our boundary or our outline of our view, there's not really a need to have these extra pieces of line trailing off, so we can clean them up either with the trim command or by dragging these blue grips. But I'm just going to trim these off like this. Okay, so now we have recreated this red outline here. And at this point, I'm actually going to switch that layer. So I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to set the layer to be my A-Elev outline layer. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is take a look at our soffit. So basically we have a soffit that's going to be coming down 11 inches from the height of our ceiling. All right, so if you don't know what a soffit is, basically it's just a portion of ceiling that hangs a little bit lower than the rest of the ceiling, and it's closed off with a small wall segment that runs up to the higher ceiling. So in this case, it's basically inside of this laundry room space so that the cabinets have a nice point to mount to and that there's not just open space above the cabinetry. But oftentimes there'll also be soffits in buildings for the purpose of enclosing ductwork and things like that when you're not able to conceal them within the higher portion of the ceiling. All right, so our soffit line is this yellow line right here, and that's going to be 11 inches lower than our regular ceiling. So I'm going to take this top line and I'm going to copy it down 11 inches. And then I'm going to switch its layer, and its new layer is going to be the A-Elev dark layer. All right. All right, so now that that's done, we can go ahead and start blocking in the outline of our cabinetry here. So what I'm going to start out with is establishing where this countertop goes. And you can see that the countertop is set at 2 different heights. So first there's this taller portion on the left side, and then there's this lower portion on the right side where the sink is. So what I can do, this is where you want to start projecting lines from your floor plan in order to establish where that height change occurs. So I'm going to draw a new line, and then I'm going to start right here at the end point of this line, draw that straight up, and if I keep going, you can see exactly what that is referencing. So that is showing me exactly where those 2 countertops split and where the upper countertop is overlapping with the lower countertop. So coming back down here, I'm just going to extend that line all the way through my elevation and then click again and click escape to end that command. Okay, so now I'm going to reference my dimensions that I have up here in my elevation that's already drawn. So we can see the height of this upper countertop is 3 foot 5 inches. So I'm going to take this line, I'm going to copy that up 3 foot 5 inches right there. And now I'm going to trim off this portion of it on the right. So trim, use this as my fence, hit enter, and then trim off that. All right, so now my countertop thickness is going to be 2 inches. So I'm going to copy that line down by 2 inches. And then I'm going to finish off the little line segment right here, like that. Okay, so now this portion of the countertop is 3 feet off of the ground. So for that, I'll do the same thing. I'm going to copy this up by 3 feet. And then I'm going to pull this back to this midpoint here. And then I'm going to copy this down by 2 inches. Okay, so now that that's done, there's actually one more thing that we need to do. This actually extends an inch underneath of this countertop here. So in other words, this countertop has an overhang and they overlap slightly. So you can see that up here. If I look, there's a slight overhang, and that is a 1 inch overhang. So what I want to do is basically extend these lines over 1 inch. All right, so what we can do is actually use the stretch command. So if I highlight that line and then I use stretch and then I click on that endpoint and then I drag to the left, I can type in 1 inch and hit enter, and that's going to stretch that over an extra inch for me. Then I can go down to this line here, and then I can just grab that grip, use my reference line snapping, and then drag that back down, and you can see that it snaps there and they match. Now I'll just add in my little line segment to close off that portion of the countertop. Okay, so now let's set these to be the correct layer. So the layer that these countertops need to be is A Olive Dark. So I'm going to highlight all my portions of my countertop, and I'm going to switch these to A Olive Dark. And it appears we have a slight gap here from where we did the stretch command, so I'm just going to grab this and then I'm going to use the grip and I'm going to stretch that to the right so that that is ending at the wall. All right, so now that those countertops are in, we are going to delete our construction line, and then I'm going to basically add in this line right here that divides the two countertops, or the two portions of the cabinetry. So I'm going to take this, actually, let's see. I'm just going to take this line segment here and I'm just going to extend this upward and then highlight again and extend that downward. And then that will be set to a different layer. So we'll highlight it and then we'll switch that, and that one is going to go on A Olive Medium. Okay. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to basically draw the outline of these upper cabinets. Okay, so those are going to be 1 foot 11 inches above the countertop. So I'm just going to take this line now. I'm going to copy it. 1 foot 11 inches. It's a little bit too much. Let's redo that. Oh, 1 foot 1 inch. I'm sorry. We'll copy that. 1 foot 1 inch. Okay, that looks better. And then if we look at our floor plan now, we can tell where those cabinets are supposed to end based on these two lines here. So we can see right here is the end point for the side of the cabinet. So I'm going to create a new line segment, new construction line. From the end point there, drag it all the way up through my elevation, click escape, and now I can see where I need to draw in this new line segment. So now I'll create a new line segment. I will start it at this intersection here, and I'll drag it up to my soffit line, and then I'll click escape to end the command, and I can delete out my construction line. Then all that's left to do is clean up this intersection. Okay, so now we'll set those to be the correct layer, and those are also going to be A elevation medium. So I'll use my match properties command. I will type MA and hit enter. I will select this blue line, and then I will switch these two lines to be that as well. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to block in this window right here. So this one, I'm going to add in a few additional measurements, but all the measurements for all this cabinetry is going to be given to you in a separate document that you'll have to refer to redraw it. So I'm not going to go in here and draw all of this here in this video. I'm just going to leave it up to you to go in and add those items on your own. But I can get you started on this window right here. So I'm going to take a quick measurement. So this window is going to be 2 inches away from the wall. So that's where it'll start. And actually we can see this, well, we can start drawing the window based on here. So if you're looking at this in floor plan, we're not actually seeing the casing that wraps around the window. So that's basically what this border is. This is the casing. So this is just a wood frame that is surrounding the window on the wall. What we're seeing in our floor plan view is basically this line, this line, this line, and this line. So if I extend these lines up, you'll see what I mean. So you can see that's what we're seeing from the floor plan reflected on the elevation of the wall. Okay, so we basically need to draw in this casing that is going around the window. Okay, so we can see here, going back to our elevation that we're drawing, that's where basically the window frame is going to fall. And this casing is going to be 4 inches wide. So I'm going to grab these outer lines and I'm going to copy them in either direction by 4 inches. Do the same over here. Okay. All right, so the bottom of our casing at the very bottom, that is going to be, let me measure it again, 4 foot 1 inch from the floor. So I'm going to take my floor line again. I'm going to copy that. 4 foot 1 inch. All right, so now we're getting a lot of lines in here, so I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning things up a little bit so that we don't need all this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim. I'm going to use this line as my fence, hit enter. I'm going to trim off all of these lines. And then I'm going to grab this line. I'm going to use the grips and I'm going to pull the end of the line back to this line we just drew, and then grab this one and pull it right there to that line we just drew. All right, so the distance from here to the bottom of this windowsill, that's also going to be 4 inches, just like the sides. So now I'll go back down and I will copy that upward by 4 inches. Okay, and then I'm going to take one more measurement, and the sill is going to be 1 inch thick, and from the top of the sill to the top of the window is going to be 2 foot 4 inches. So we'll go back down here and we're going to copy this line upward by 1 inch, and then we're going to click escape and then copy our new line, and that's going to go upward by 2 foot 4 inches. and that is the top of our window. Okay. So then basically we can use this line and we can trim and clean up all these extension lines. And then we can copy this line down 4 inches to get our top piece of casing that's running over the window. So copy that one more time, downward 4 inches. And now we can clean this up a little bit further. Okay, so I'm just going to use the blue grips for this. So I'm going to click on this line first. I'm going to pull that grip back there. I'm going to grab this one, pull that one in there, pull this one in there, pull this one down to that intersection. And then we can take this line here and then pull it up to the top of the windowsill for now. Do the same on this side. And then actually we'll just do that for both of these. Okay. This one's also going to come down here, and this one will come down here. And then we're going to need to extend these slightly because our sill has a slight overhang to it. If you look, you can see that comes out, I believe, 1 inch. Yes, it comes out 1 inch. So what I'm going to do here is draw in a small line segment right there, and then exit the command. Do one on this side as well. And then I will highlight that using my blue selection window so I get just that little piece of line work, and I'm going to move it to the left by 1 inch. Do the same thing on this side. And then I can just click on these lines and then just use the blue grips to extend them as I need. Okay, with that done, we can go ahead and use these 2 lines then to trim. And we're going to remove this small portion of line and this small portion of line. Okay, so we're getting really close here. The last thing that we need to do is offset this line and this line by this distance. Okay, so if you remember from our floor plan, that should be 2 inches. Yep, that's 2 inches. So I'm going to copy this line straight up by 2 inches, and then I'm going to copy this line downward by 2 inches. Okay, so now all that's left is to clean up these intersections and assign the layers. So I'm going to go around and clean up all these intersections. Okay, so there's the window. Now we just need to go in and match the correct layer assignments. So basically the entire window is going to be on the medium layer with the exception of these lines on the very inside. So I'm going to highlight everything, my whole window, and then I'm going to use my, let's see, which key is it? My shift key. If I hold shift and I hover over a line segment, I can click on it to deselect it. So I'm going to hold shift, I'm going to go around and click on these 4 line segments to deselect them. Now I'm going to go to my layers and I'm going to switch these to my A elevation medium, and I'm going to switch these 4 lines to be A elevation thin. All right. So there we go. There is our window. So the last couple of things that I'm going to show you is adding in our sink, adding in our line that is going to create our boundary for our backsplash, and I'll actually show you how to do these hatches as well. Okay, so if you look at this, we're going to create a line between the bottom of the cabinet and this windowsill, and then there's another little line segment here. And it's really important that we draw these in, because if we don't, our hatch is going to basically bleed outward into areas that we don't want. All right, so I'm going to add in 2 more little lines, one right there to the corner of my sill, and then one at the corner of the sill here to my wall. And these lines are also going to be on A elevation medium, so I'm going to match property. I'm going to select my magenta line here. Oh, I'm sorry, A elevation thin, not medium. So I'm going to select my magenta line. Then I'm going to click on this line and then this line that I just made. Okay, so the next thing we need to do before we go ahead and start making our hatch patterns is add in the front elevation of the sink. So I'm going to use my block that I have here as reference, and I'm going to draw a construction line from the midpoint straight upward. Okay, and I can just, as long as it's going all the way through this countertop, that's long enough for what I need. Then I'm going to go over to my faucet. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to copy it from the midpoint at the bottom, and that is going to snap right there at the top of the counter. Okay, then I can just delete out this line because I don't need it anymore. All right, so then the last thing that I'm going to show you for this drawing is adding in our hatch patterns. Okay, so first we're going to do our tile hatch. So the tile hatch is going to be this hatch pattern here. It's going to be AR-B816. So make sure that you have that hatch pattern. You should. That should be a standard one that comes within AutoCAD. And we're going to set the scale of that to be 0.25. Okay, so you just need to worry about the hatch being AR-B816 and the hatch pattern, or I'm sorry, the scale being 0.25. So if I'm doing that from scratch, I'm going to switch my layer and I'm going to make it my A elevation pat layer. And then I'm going to go into my hatch tool. I'm going to select that hatch pattern that we just used previously. And we're going to click inside of our closed region that we just drew. Okay, and then that will add our hatch pattern in nicely for us. So something else that you're going to see, if you look at this, and this is how it would be like in reality, you'd want to align the tiles so that they fit correctly inside of here. So if you look, the tiles perfectly fit and they end exactly at that top line. But if you look at what I have in here now, you can see that it sort of starts halfway inside of a tile and ends halfway inside of a tile. So for that, what we would need to do is select our hatch pattern and actually let me redo that. Okay, so what you want to do is select the hatch pattern, and then you want to go here to where it says set origin, and you want to set the origin to be somewhere one of these 2 points here or here. I'm actually just going to redo that and choose this point here, and now you can see that my hatch pattern is starting perfectly against this line here, and it's ending perfectly against these lines here, and that's what you want. Also, it's starting perfectly against this edge of the wall instead of it sort of being in between. So then any excess left over is just a little piece here at the end on this side. All right, so that's what we're looking for. So just select your hatch pattern again and click on the set origin, and then click on this corner point right here, and that should align your hatch correctly. And then just make sure that your scale again is set to 0.25, and then hit enter once you set the scale, and it should be scaled correctly. All right, once you're done with that, you can click close hatch editor. If you did it correctly, it should be this gray color, and it should be on the A elevation pat layer. And then next we're gonna do this this little hatch pattern here for the glass. So anytime you have glass, you usually want to add these little reflection lines in here, and that is its own hatch pattern. So if I select that, you'll be able to see that it's this hatch pattern here, GOST glass, and my scale is set to 2. All right, so what I'm going to do is go back down here, use my hatch tool again, and then I'm going to use my GOST glass hatch, and then I'm going to click inside of my window. Okay, so to get this perfectly how I want it, I'm going to click on Close Hatch Editor, and then I'm going to use like a little bit of a trick here. So I want to get these 2 hatch lines to be like right in the middle of my window like that. So what I do is I click the entire hatch, and then I'm just going to use this like this blue point in the middle, and I'm going to click it, and I'm just going to use that to drag the hatch upward a little bit. So once I get those 2 bottom hatch lines roughly centered in the window, I'm going to click once, and then I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to move it to the left until I get them roughly centered horizontally inside the window. Okay, so now you can see that I have those where I want them, but my cropping region is off. So now all I have to do is edit those points and make them go back to where they need to be. So we'll just click on all 4 corner points and re-snap them to the magenta lines. And you can see that the hatch is now correct. And just make sure that the scale for this one is set to 2. So then you can just go ahead and click on Close the Hatch Editor, and this should be what you're left with if you've done it correctly. All right, so the rest of this elevation I'm going to leave up to you. I will provide you with the dimensions and an overall explanation of like the layers everything goes on. Basically though, if you just reference what I'm going to say right now, you won't have to worry too much about it. These lines here, you want to make sure that for the doors, you're snapping them to the corners and to the midpoint on the other side of the door. So if you remember from the first lecture, the where the arrow is pointing, so where this like diamond shaped is pointing, that is the hinge side of the door, and the other side is the side where the door opens. Okay, so then those are going to go on our A elevation hidden layer, and you'll just want to make sure that your layer settings are set up properly based on what we went over at the start of this video. The door handles here, I don't believe those dimensions are given on the form that I'm distributing. These are basically just rectangles, so just draw one rectangle and then copy it a bunch of times. And these measure 3 inches wide by ½ an inch tall. Okay, so you just want to make a rectangle that is 3 inches wide, ½ an inch tall, put it on the A elevation thin layer, and then this is just going to be copied around and rotated to be in the correct spot. Positioning these correctly on the doors is pretty simple. Once you have all these doors drawn in, what you want to do, the easiest way I have found to center things is I like to take and draw a line segment from corner to corner. And then let's say I have my handle and it's somewhere out here. I like to draw just a temporary line segment that runs through the middle of the handle like that. And then I highlight the entire thing and I move it. And I move it from the midpoint of that little line segment I drew, and I find the midpoint of that that diagonal line that I drew, and that will make sure that the line is perfectly centered within the door face. Okay, then you can just go in and delete those extra lines that you don't need. Same goes for this here, but for that what I would do is basically just draw a little line segment down like this. And then from this point to this upper corner here, that's basically going to give you the center. If you imagine this being like a square, like just a tall, skinny rectangle, like here. The midpoint of this line is going to be right where you want to put the vertical handle right here. So then it's just the same thing. You're just going to want to draw a little line segment there, and you would just move that handle from that midpoint to the midpoint there to get it in the correct spot. These ones up here, these, as you'll notice, they're not in the center of the doors. There's not really a proper dimension for these. Just get them roughly approximate to where I have them. So you could basically do what I did here for these lower cabinets and get it centered on the doors themselves. But then you could just grab all of them and just move them all down and just get them roughly where I am showing them on my drawing. All right. Okay, so that is it for the elevation. I'm going to leave it up to you to finish the rest of it. The next thing that we're going to talk about is our sheet setup. So this is going to be a little bit of what I talked about in our layout and publishing video. But basically, we're going to have two sheets for this assignment. We're going to have an A101 and an A102. So if I toggle to A101, you're going to see what that looks like. What you want to do is you want to go in here and you want to create your two viewports. We're going to have a construction plan and we're going to have a reflected ceiling plan. Both of these are going to be set up at a 1/4 inch scale. And this is the information you need to include in your title block, okay? So the title block, we're going to have a sheet on sheet A101. We're going to name it A101. We're going to set the scale to a 1/4 inch equals 1 foot 0 inches. The date is going to be whatever date you're completing this. And then we're going to add in our sheet names. So just match everything you're seeing here. And then where it says student name, put your name, okay? So you're just going to type your name in there. When we have this block, I just want to show you something really quick. If you put this block in here and you double click on it, you can edit in all your fields like you've done with some of the other blocks. So you just click through these different options here and you edit the value. When you get to this one for the sheet name, so if I go down here, you're going to see that it's not going to let you edit that directly. You actually have to click here on this button to open the multi-line editor. So click on that. That's going to take you down to sort of this text editor within the title block. And I'm just going to delete this out really quick. What you want to do is start typing that in. So construction plan. Then when you get to here, just hit enter to create a new line. And type and create a new line. Reflected ceiling plan. Actually, after reflected ceiling, hit enter one more time and put plan below it. And then when you're done with it, just click outside of the box and then click OK, and that is going to apply that. So that's how you edit that field. So make sure you remember to do that. It's not like the other ones. You have to sort of do it a little bit differently. Okay, but for this, what I am showing here for my construction plan on the left side, this is correct. This is the exact information that we're wanting to see, other than I have to add my doors back in. So I'm going to toggle back in here really quick, and I'm going to unfreeze my doors. So if I scroll down and I find my A door layer, I'm going to unfreeze that. So then now my doors are appearing, and this is exactly what you are going to want to show me when you lay out this drawing. For our reflected ceiling plan, we have to change a few things. So first, I'm going to use my freeze tool. I'm going to double click inside of my viewport. Make sure that you are in model space. Okay, very important. Now you want to use your freeze tool and you want to get rid of the dimensions. Okay, so we'll click on that to get rid of our dimensions. And then I also want to get rid of this elevation marker. Okay, and next I want to go in and unfreeze a few things. So I'm going to pull down my layer options. I want to unfreeze all of my ceiling layers. So if I go in here, I have my A ceiling pattern frozen, unfreeze that, turn on my lights, and then turn on my A ceiling ident. Okay, so there's my ceiling identifier. And now I'm going to switch back to Paperspace. Once I'm done with that, just click on the model button. That'll switch me back to my Paperspace. And this is what you want to show me for this sheet. Okay, so this is now a complete sheet. You're going to have it exactly like I am showing. So just replicate exactly what you're seeing here. Make sure that all your ceiling content is being shown in the reflected ceiling plan. Make sure you have your titles. I went over how to set up the titles in the previous video, so make sure you reference that and get those in, and then add in all the correct things for your construction plan. Okay, switching over to A102. This is going to be our elevation sheet, so do the same thing here, elevation and door schedule. The scale here is actually going to be a little bit bigger, so I want you guys to show me this elevation at a 1/2 inch scale this time instead of a 1/4 inch, because I want you getting some experience using different annotation scales for your dimensions, okay? So you'll have to refer back to last week's video, likely, in order to get these sizes correct, but just go in here and make sure that this is set up so that we have a 1/2 inch annotation scale on our dimensions. And the same is true for A101, except this is going to be an annotation scale on our dimensions of a 1/4 inch because we're showing the drawing at a 1/4 inch. So like I said, if you forget how to set that up, I went in depth on how to create annotation styles last week in last week's content. So go back and take a look at that and make sure you get your dimensions set up correctly. Okay, so when you're done, the dimensions should show up consistently the same size between the two drawing sheets, even though we're using different scales. So you're going to want to set up your elevation to be just like this. You want to show these exact dimensions that I'm showing on here. Something else that we're going to include here, which I will actually do that really quick, is we're going to add in a leader that is going to point this out as a 2x4 backsplash. So I'm going to go in here to my annotations. I'm going to go to my leader styles. So I'm going to type in M leader style. And then I'm going to create a new one. So I have this annotative one in here, but I'm going to run through the process of how to create a new annotative one just as a review from last week. So I'm going to start with my standard. I'm going to highlight that and I'm going to click on new. And I'm going to call this one annotative 2. If you don't have an annotative one in yours, just call it annotative. Click continue, and then that will take us to this window here. Now what we want to do is we want to find the annotative adjustment. So we're going to go here under leader structure and we're going to toggle on annotative. And then the rest of this should be fine. Yep, the rest of this is good. So we just want to make sure under leader structure we check annotative and then click OK. And then we're going to click close. All right, so now we have annotative set as our leader style up here. And our annotation scale, remember, we're going to be showing this drawing at a 1/2 inch. So you want to come down here to the bottom right corner and you want to toggle this and you want to make sure that we have the annotation scale set to 1/2 inch. Okay, and it's very important that each time you change the annotations you're adding in, that you modify that that setting. Okay, so when I'm adding in my dimensions for my floor plan, I'm going to set that to a 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to make all my dimensions. Then when I go up here to add in dimensions and annotations for my elevation, go back down here and switch that to be 1/2 inch. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to click on my multi-leader, and now my first point, remember, is going to be my arrowhead. So I'm going to start that arrowhead somewhere in here. I'm going to drag out to the right, and then I'm going to type in my note. So my note is going to be 2" by 4" tile. And then I'm going to hit enter. All right, so when I was creating my leader, I was having a little bit of an issue with the annotation scale. So if you look, even though I set the scale to be annotative and for it to automatically set the correct text height, you can see that compared to my dimensions that I've put in here, it's a little bit too big. So if you're having the same issue, what you might need to do is create the leader, add in your text, and then click on it. And then if you go over here to your properties bar on the left side, you want to switch the text height right here where it says 3/16 of an inch in my case, and I'm going to switch that to be 3/32 of an inch, and then hit enter. And now you can see that the text is the correct height when compared to the text on my dimensions. All right, so like I said, if you're having issues getting that to show correctly, just go in here, highlight it, and then manually go over and set it to be the correct text height here on the left. So now the next thing that we need to do is set this to be the correct layer. So I'm going to highlight my leader. I'm going to go back to my home tab on the ribbon, and then I'm going to go to my layers, and I'm going to set that to be my Anno note layer. All right, so this is essentially what you want. You just want a leader that is coming off and that is pointing to your elevation, to your backsplash, and it just says 2x4 tile. Now, one other thing is you can see in my case, I'm having my hatch overlap with my leader. So I want to change that. So I'm going to click on my leader, and then I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go to draw order, and I'm going to click on bring to front, and that will bring it over top of my hatch pattern so that way they don't interfere in any sort of way weirdly. Okay, I'm going to bump it down a little bit. There. All right, so going back to my sheet, I'll make this crop region slightly bigger so that you can see it. The next thing that we need to add in here is this door schedule. Okay, so a door schedule is basically just a table that contains information about the doors in your project. Since we're doing this tiny little laundry room space, we only have 2 doors to put in the door schedule, but usually you're going to have a lot more doors inside of your project, so this table is going to be a lot bigger. But to create this door schedule, what we're going to do is we're going to first type in the command table style, and this is going to bring us to a table editor. So just like dimension style and text style, all that, we can create table styles. So we're going to go to our standard table style, and we're going to click on modify, and we are going to change a few settings here. So we're going to click on this text tab first, and we're going to make sure that we're on title first of all, and we're going to set our title height to be 3/16 of an inch. Okay. Then we're going to go to our headers. So if you click the drop down and you go to header, we are going to change the height of our headers to be 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and then we're going to go to the data section, and we're going to change the text height there to also be 1/8 of an inch. All right, so after you do that, we're going to go over to the borders tab, and we're going to click on this option right here that says all borders, and then we're going to click on OK. Once that's done, just double click on standard to make sure it's set, and then click on close. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is actually type the table command. So that's just table. and it's going to ask us for a few things. So the table style, make sure that's standard. And then the columns and rows, we're going to set the columns to 5 and the data rows to 3. All right, so let's change that to a 3. Oh no, actually we're going to change that to be a 2 because we're going to have this is the header row and that's added in automatically. So set data rows to 2 and then just click OK. And then you're going to have your cursor and you can place in the table. So now it's prompting us to add in our title. Once we've done that, we're going to type in door schedule. Make sure that you're set to all caps. Okay, and then I can double click inside of these cells and add my information. So here I'm going to type in door number. Then I'll hit tab to switch to the next cell. This one's size. And then material, type, and finish. Okay, then for our next row, our first door is going to be 101A. The size is going to be 2 foot 6 inches by 7 foot 0 inches. I'm actually going to switch the X to be lowercase. I think that looks a little bit better. Material is going to be wood. The type is going to be C, and the finish is painted. So where it says type, whenever you're creating an actual CD set or a construction document set, you're going to have different door types, and this C that I've put in here, like so we have a C and an F for these 2 different door types, that would all be explained somewhere else in your drawing set in greater detail exactly what those designations mean. But for the purposes of our project, we're just going to put in just a generic, letter to indicate a type. We're not actually going to go in and add the extra information and define what C or F means. Okay, so then next we're going to add in 101B. That is also going to be 2 foot 6 by 7. So what we can do is actually just toggle back out of this. If we click on our first cell, we can just click on this blue marker and drag it down to the next cell and then click again. And if you've ever used Excel before, that it's basically just the duplicate feature. You can do the same thing for the material, and you can do the same thing for where it says painted. And then we can just go back in here and add in our F like that. All right, so then you just want to position this somewhere reasonable on your sheet. I like to align things, so I like to make the top of this roughly aligned with the top of my elevation. And then we just want to set the layer to be something that's reasonable. I'm just going to switch mine to the 0 layer because I know that it's going to print correctly if it's on the 0 layer, so I'll just set that to be 0, and that should be good. All right, so basically on this sheet, you just want to have this door schedule here. You want to have your elevation, and on all of your sheets, make sure that you have your viewports set up on a layer that is not going to plot. So I covered that in detail in the last video, but just as a recap, make sure that your actual viewport, so that border that you're seeing, that's that peach color, is set to a layer such as def points. If you have that in your project, just put it on the def points layer. But if you don't have that in your project, create a new layer called viewport or something like that, and then make sure that the setting underneath of plot is set to no plot. So it's just going to look like this little printer that has a little circle with an X through it, and that's going to make it so that you don't see that actual peach colored outline whenever you go to print this out. All right, so this is all the project is. Make sure you have A101 just like this. Copy the information exactly as you see it. Make sure that everything is set up this way with the exact dimensions that I have here. Basically, if you duplicate this exactly, you're going to get an A. Don't do what I did here and make your symbols overlap with your other drawing elements. So I'm going to move this over, just make sure that everything is clear and legible and not overlapping. And make sure all of your title block information is filled out correctly. Use a 1/4 of an inch scale on A101 and use a 1/2 inch scale on A102. That's a big thing that I see people miss, and so I mark off a lot for that, is they don't put the correct scales or don't add the correct information into the title block. Make sure that you're duplicating everything you're seeing on my screen here, just like this, and you're going to be good. Okay, same exact dimensions and everything like that. When you go to print, copy the exact same print settings that I covered in the previous video where I went over print layouts and publishing. Make sure you're using the KSU full plot style, so that whenever we go to print this out, we have that plot style set correctly, so that when we hit preview, our preview is going to look something like this. All right, always preview your drawing and make sure that everything matches correctly based on what I am showing here. All right. So then once you have that, you want to print out both sheets, and then you want to make sure they are combined together in a single PDF file. You can do that by either using the batch plot option that I covered in the previous video, or you can print them out separately and then use a tool like Adobe Acrobat or an online service to combine the two files together into a single PDF file. Okay, that's really important. It helps me grade. So make sure you submit a single PDF file that has 2 pages, A101 and A102. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. Like I said, the information you need to finish the elevation is going to be provided in a separate document that will be attached to this video. So be on the lookout for that, and let me know if you have any questions. All right, good luck getting everything finished.